Prince Ludwig III, also known as Louis the Younger, was a Carolingian prince who ultimately inherited East Francia and subsequently Bavaria. He is not known for being particularly pious or for his deeds in the military, save for that time when he defeated his uncle in battle, whilst outnumbered, with his men dressing in white to give the impression that they were spirits, which is pretty cool, I'm not going to lie. Louis the Younger generally maintained stability among the East Frankish nobility and his royal relatives, but his success was mixed. He cooperated with his brothers Carloman and Charles the Fat,
My doctor has notified me that I'm morbidly obese.
avoiding major internal conflicts, which was rare among Carolingians. However, he struggled to fully consolidate power, as his rule was largely reactive, defending against West Frankish invasions and managing external threats like the Slavs and the Vikings, rather than strengthening his central authority. His premature death in 882, that is the year 882 AD, left East Francia divided and vulnerable, ultimately leading to his brother, Charles the Fat, and his ineffective reign and the fragmentation of Carolingian rule. With this playthrough, I intend to rewrite history, to take Prince Ludwig and his descendants on a path from Europe to the steppe, to become the greatest of Khans. Starting with Ludwig, the first thing I need to do is become tribal and Norse. I want to access the Varangian adventure mechanic, and being tribal in 867 is a lot easier than being feudal. First, I set my sights on the chiefdom of Rogaland. This is the starting point. You will note that my prized catapults, a technology completely unknown to the backwards Norse, will come in handy. Sometimes the RNG is in your favor, and sometimes it is not. For the first time, I got the brave trait from an event. This is great because when I ultimately convert to a Satru, which is a far cry from being a pious Christian, I'll have a virtue for my faith. But in any event, having got a claim on Rogaland, it's time to declare war. I approach my piggy bank, Mr. Pope, and get the money I'm entitled to. I win the war quite convincingly, and I have my first tribal county. The neighboring tribal county is also weak, so I yoink that too, moving my capital to Rogaland and converting my culture. No longer am I a Franconian, but a Norseman with my superior culture, renowned for excellent cuisine.
Oh, you have to try out meatballs. Yeah, those are great, with some jam on the side.
In order to fit into my new homeland, I think a name change is in order, so I ultimately go with Brynjolf. I go for my third tribal county, conquering in quick succession. In order to become tribal, however, I must give away all my feudal counties, which I promptly do. My priest gets it all, he's quite a lucky guy, and that allows me to embrace tribalism. Already I can feel Charlemagne rolling in his grave. I do, however, notice that it costs 8,000 piety to convert to a Satru, so I'm still quite far off. Nevertheless, being Norse allows me to reign a runestone. It's actually an incredibly overpowered thing. It gives you legitimacy, piety, and prestige, and can increase the control of the county that you've just conquered. So it's pretty powerful. And on top of that all, being Norse allows me to hire Varangian veterans, which are probably my most favorite men-at-arms in the game. Being tribal and with my neighbors so weak, it is time to acquire more land, which I promptly do. Ultimately, as befitting my new station, I create the Duchy of Gulapslingslog, and take a trip to my barber for Norse drip, removing my foppish hairstyle. One change I love to the game, which is an absolute pain if you want the world to bend to your every whim, is conquerors. Unfortunately, my neighbor Björn Ironside is now a conqueror. Fuck, this might make it a little bit more difficult in the long run, but I'll deal with him later. In the meantime, raiding is a wonderful pastime, and I can do this. I would never have been able to do so as a foppish Frenchman, but things are different now. I need more land. More land is more power. But in the midst of acquiring more land, I became the King of East Francia, as historically was the case. I don't really want it, but I reshuffle my cabinet anyway and give away some duchies. I'm feudal again, so I guess I've got to become tribal once again in the same lifetime. I noticed that Björn is creeping ever closer. If he declares war on me, I will not be able to beat him. He's quite scary for an early game obstacle, but we've got to roll with the punches. I know that my current character will not be in a position to make his way to Mongolia. I mean, he's already getting on in years, so it's important that I build up my realm to make my heir's life easier in the long run. Whilst I am raiding, as Norsemen do, I get a faction. They do not wish for me to be king of East Francia any longer. This actually works well for me, so I accede to their request, becoming a mere Jarl. Now it is my turn. Immediately I start an independence war. But I still need to become a Sachu. This is not necessarily a requirement, but honestly, I want to go the full hog. Why half-ass being a proper Norse Viking? So I start going down the learning tree to get the apostate. I win my independence war quite easily, so now independent. Great stuff. Björn, however, is terrifying, and so I use my newfound independence to swear fealty to Björn. I see it's still 10,000 piety? Holy shit. Well, I mean, let me tell you something. There is a solution to this. You can get a bonus to converting to a religion, and by that I mean a reduction in conversion costs if your spouse is of that faith. So, goodbye, Catholic wife. I need to seduce a feisty Norseman woman with large tracts of land and a good arm. And on this score, I find Svanhilde. Having successfully convinced Svanhilde of my amorous intentions, she becomes my wife.
My wife!
Now it's only 6,000 piety to convert to a Sachu, which is much better. But I will in any event require more piety, so it's time to go on a pilgrimage and another, all while raiding in between. I still retain the moniker of Bavaria, despite the fact that I am not one proud Bavarian. Nevertheless, in the fullness of time, I get the apostate perk. It is now only 262 piety to convert to a Sachu, so I promptly convert to the one true faith. Take a sip of my whiskey. At this stage, I just need my current liege conqueror to die. It's not too much longer for him. I can see his health is not that great. But then I notice all of his kingdom titles are passing to the same guy, which sucks, as it means his power is going to be consolidated. Scandinavian elective might be one of the most powerful early game succession types, particularly in the hands of a player. It is the only reason I continue to play as a Norseman in 867. I just want the Ting meat tradition every time. Another tip I can give to anyone playing with the Norse is to make good use of the performative honor tradition while tribal. It allows you to make your children duel, and in turn gain the Blade Master trait as a 12-year-old. I do think it's a little unfair subjecting your child at 12 years old to a duel with a fully grown adult berserker, but it's necessary in the grander scheme of things. I do this with my child and he gets injured, of course, but at least he gains the Blade Master trait. Next, it is time to make my long sojourn towards the lands of the steppe, stepping stones, if you will. The first destination is Italy, which is notionally closer to Mongolia than Denmark. That said, a raiding base in the Mediterranean is essential for even more moolah. My liege, Björn, finally kicks the bucket, and, as predicted, all of the Scandinavian kingdoms are now his sons. Might be time for an independence war, so I gather some strong allies for the fight ahead of me. In order to gain the upper hand, I take my men to his capital before launching the independence faction. With what I believe to be a trap laid for my new liege, I launch the faction, putting my catapults, machines utterly unknown to the Norse, to good use. But no matter how hard I try, the war score keeps ticking down. This is because the other faction members, utterly useless twats, have had their land sieged by my new liege, meaning that ultimately the game recognized my liege as controlling the war target. This notwithstanding the fact that I am the faction leader. In any event, to make matters worse, my liege arrives with his legions, and ultimately I am absolutely destroyed. I have to call it as I see it. I won't win this war, and it will simply exhaust my treasury further. So I surrender and give my liege a hook in me for my release. Fucking idiot. In my frustration, I almost considered abandoning the run, but I turned to my least favorite mechanic of achieving what I want to achieve: murder most foul. It's not typically something I like to do, but we gotta do what we gotta do. As with my firstborn son, I constantly do rites of passage, which even nets me a little bit of extra renown. Not that I really need it, being a Karling and all. My dynasty is all over Europe like cockroaches. My murder scheme is successful in the long run, finally splitting the kingdoms properly. Now I declare independence and I win this war quite easily. I'm quite old now, but at least I'm a Norse Asatru Karling, and I nevertheless continue to advance towards Mongolia again, and again, and again. It is now a race against the clock, which is exacerbated by the fact that there's no longer a way for me to simply conquer a county or duchy, so now I have to fabricate claims on these rugged steppe counties. I do so, all the while feeling the squeeze of mortality, albeit that I've not had the event "I will be dead in a year" yet. Declaring war on the county I fabricated a claim on, you will note that my men are really struggling. There is nothing in the steppe and no supply. This is a case in point as to why I need to be close to Mongolia in order to do a Varangian adventure. If I should fail to do so, my men will be starving by the time they get to the counties I need to siege. Basically, it is hell to be in the steppe as a non-steppe culture. During this long and protracted war where my men are constantly on the brink of starvation, I get the dreaded event. I will be dead in a year. My realm is going to fracture, that much is clear. However, the main duchy, which I'd been building up, being Gulapulaglaskau, will go to my heir. If I can draw out the war more prior to my death, I might lose my stepping stone counties, but I will retain my current war, and therefore my steppe county when I conquer it. Finally, I die, and I'm noted as being a keen hunter, despite the fact that I had gone on like one hunt in my entire life, which might add I failed. In any event, I am now Sturla. He is quite a cool guy. I've lost some counties on succession, but it's not a stress because I'm barreling ever closer to Mongolia. Once I win the war, I now have a county in the region of the steppe. I still need to get closer before I'm comfortable in doing a Varangian adventure. Once again, I have to fabricate claims to get further into the steppe. In the meantime, while I'm waiting for my claim to fire, I go on hunts, feasts, raids, and after taking a Cuman woman as my concubine, she becomes my soulmate and my wife, true steppe style. I then, stupidly, decide to break my own rule. I got a Varangian adventure. What the fuck am I saying? Varangian adventure into the Kyrgyz Khanate, despite the fact that my closest steppe county is miles away. You can see my hesitation, but I do it anyway. I muster my forces and send them on their way. I fight the elements, the steppe, supply, and occasionally Kyrgyz forces. But it really is a back and forth exchange, no side really gaining too much ground, and all the while my men soldier on. After siege and siege and siege, and each battle, I have to split my armies into tiny forces to simply resupply them. And the entire time I'm doing so, various counties, including the counties situated in the duchy I am doing a Varangian adventure for, are becoming independent, as their liege gets walloped by a bunch of Norsemen. It really is hopeless at this point, so I go for a white peace. But my efforts were not fruitless. In the midst of weakening the Kyrgyz Khanate, the juicy and whole duchy of Selenga Valley becomes independent. They are weak, so I attempt yet another Varangian adventure. I win this war quite easily, and finally I've achieved my goal. I'm in Mongolia. To fit the theme, I convert to Tengriism. I want to create a Norse-Mongol hybrid culture in the long run. I also notice, during this time, that my coat of arms has become a hodgepodge mess, so I reverted back to historical. But at least finally I'm in Mongolia. I can finally realize my father's dream of riding back to Europe at the head of a massive horde of horse archers, along with the good old Varangian adventurers, which presumably need to walk alongside the army. I take this time to build up my realm, as this will be my power base, and I will subject this duchy to Scandinavian elective, ensuring that no matter how many children I have, the entire duchy will go to my chosen heir. This is because I will not be making this current character the greatest of Khans. I want to do this with a character as young as possible, to maximize the number of years that I am the greatest of Khans. This makes my current character, Sturla, my stitching character. He will ensure that his heir is primed to become the greatest of Khans. I begin to expand my borders within the kingdom of Mongolia. This is because I need vassals to drive up cultural acceptance, which can be accelerated by grand tours. Some of the local Mongolian warlords wish to swear fealty to me, so I offer them a chance to join my realm willingly. After a grand tour, I can finally create a Norse-Mongol hybrid culture. At this juncture, I turned to Reddit for a name for my culture. Whilst I ultimately chose the name Tsangkun, meaning white person, there were some interesting suggestions. One in particular was Sternbergian, and when prompted for an answer as to why this was chosen, 867274, being this person's Reddit name, pointed me to a person called Baron von Ungern Sternberg. During his time on this earth, Mongolia was the Wild West, or the Wild East. And on this score, saddle up and let me spin you a yarn about the craziest, most bloodthirsty gunslinger to ever ride the Mongolian steppe. Okay, well, that's a bit of an embellishment. It's not quite true. I mean, Genghis Khan was pretty bad. But I introduce you to the one and the only Baron Roman von Ungern Sternberg. Picture Mongolia in the early 1920s. Not quite the Wild West, but close enough. The Russian Empire had just collapsed. China was trying to play sheriff. The Soviets were rolling in with their red bandanas, and chaos ruled the land. Enter our main character, the Mad Baron, a Russian noble of Baltic German descent, who looked at all this mess and thought, you know what, this needs a little bit more insanity. He was an officer in the Tsarist army during World War I, but when the Russian Revolution kicked off, he decided democracy and communism weren't his thing. Instead, he put together a ragtag posse of Cossacks, Mongols, and anyone crazy enough to follow him, and rode off into the steppe to restore the monarchy, but with extra bloodshed. In 1921, Mongolia was under Chinese rule. The Baron, with a force of white Russian exiles and Mongolian warriors, kicked the Chinese out of Urga, which is modern-day Ulaanbaatar. He then declared himself the ruler of Mongolia in the name of Bogd Khan, a Buddhist theocrat. Unlike your average conqueror, who at least tries to look sane, Ungern went full psycho. He was obsessed with mysticism, Buddhism, and medieval-style warfare. He believed he was a reincarnation of Genghis Khan and acted accordingly by dishing out mass executions, torturing his own men, and having visions of apocalyptic battles. Ungern had this grand scheme of using Mongolia as his base, then riding west to overthrow the Bolsheviks and bring the Tsar back. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. His men eventually had enough of his madness, and in late 1921, they mutinied, arrested him, and handed him over to the Soviets. In true cinematic villain fashion, when put on trial, he didn't even care. He just insulted the Bolsheviks and talked about how he had no regrets. They shot him in September 1921. He wore a Mongolian deal and chainmail while carrying a saber, revolvers, and sometimes a whip. As I've mentioned before, he was deeply into mysticism and the occult, believing himself to be guided by divine forces. He had a zero-tolerance policy for anything that displeased him, which basically meant everyone around him was one wrong look away from execution. He was one of the last people in history to try ruling as a warlord on horseback. So, in conclusion, Baron von Ungern Sternberg was basically what you'd get if you combined Genghis Khan, Rasputin, and an angry German aristocrat into one extremely violent package. His story is pure chaos. His rule was brief but legendary, and in the end, the Wild East swallowed him whole. I digress. In any event, my new culture has Mongolic heritage, which is required for the decision of greatest of Khans, Ting meat, one of my favorite traditions, coastal warriors, and performative honor. It's fucking sick. In time, I created the Kingdom of Mongolia, vassalized a couple of nearby dukes, and put Scandinavian elective on the kingdom title. And in true Horse Lord fashion, I create my first Horse Lord battalion, which feels quite cool when you have them alongside Varangian veterans. Now, I do not have access to the Mediterranean anymore, and quite frankly, I'm sick of raiding the Greeks, Italians, Berbers, Spaniards, etc. Also, the Horse Lord's tradition allows me to raid over land without taking attrition, so I don't have to stick to the coast anymore. In these circumstances, the best place to go to is India, a land rich and largely untouched by raiders, with the exception of the occasional Tibetan. This is what I do, promptly conquering a county in India to stage my future raids. Both money and prestige will now be easily accessible to me. To show you just how lucrative India is to raid, take a look at this sick raiding montage. The gold and prestige allows me to augment my power base further, so I do this, building and building, all the while declaring war to expand my territory and vassalizing nearby rulers. What is important to note, however, is that What is important to note, however, is that I am only conquering land within the Kingdom of Mongolia. This is imperative to ensure that I do not lose a kingdom within the steppe on succession. A key element to successful Scandinavian elective succession is that your errant vassals sometimes need to vote with you. They don't always do this, so the one way to get around this is to befriend your vassals, as this inevitably means that they will vote for your preferred heir. This is also essential to ensure that my heir ultimately inherits the Kingdom of Mongolia at the youngest age possible. Whilst unrelated to my current playthrough, I noticed that there had been an early attempt at the Sultanate of Rum. Quite cool. I just thought it was neat, so I'm bringing it to your attention. In any event, Sturla is now infirm. It is not long now, more so because I chose the trait flagellant to accelerate his death in the event that it becomes necessary. India has proven to be quite the breadbasket, and I'm bringing in so much gold with each successful raid. I know my time is coming, so I use my amassed prestige and gold to upgrade my holdings once more. It is likely that they will finish building by the time my current character dies. I then get the message. I will be dead within a year, passing the realm to my chosen heir. It is my heir who will become the greatest of Khans. His name is Sturla, the Prince of Fashion. I notice at this juncture that I have enough territory to form the Khanate of the Himalayas. This means I will lose my raiding base near India, so what I do, as I did beforehand, is start a war that will be inherited by my heir, giving me a raiding base near India for my heir to use. Sturla, the Mongolian king of Karling descent, passes on. His son, Sturla II, takes the throne. He has pneumonia, but at least he's ambitious. But I am terrified at this stage that he might die from pneumonia, but fortunately I recover. And in turn I win the war my father started, promptly beginning to raid once again. Fortunately, I get my own rites of passage decision, and the choices are much more varied now that I'm the subject of the decision. In any event, I chose to go with Blademaster. Anyway, once grown, Sturla II has an amazing set of traits. I know he is undoubtedly worthy of becoming the greatest of Karlings. By 14, I noticed that I'm quite close to having the required level of fame to become the greatest of Khans. I'm the level before exalted among men, and I know that this character will be riding out there at the head of a great horde at a young age. To get my prestige up further, I go on a grand tour, during which time I become a man, fully capable of running the realm on my own. On completion of the grand tour, netting 1000 prestige, I decide that it's time to expand my borders greatly, and to this end, I decide, finally, to subjugate the Kyrgyz Khanate. If I hold all the land that they hold, it should bring me closer to the required realm size for the greatest of Khans decision. It's an easy war. I completely annihilate the Kyrgyz armies and my victory is inevitable. It is not long before I win, successfully subjugating the Kyrgyz Khanate. This also allows me to create kingdoms for more prestige, getting me ever closer to the required level of fame. I renamed the Kyrgyz Khanate to something more apt, the Karling Khanate. For internal realm stability, I marry my daughter for an alliance to the erstwhile Khan. At this stage, I'm close to the required level of fame. What I really need is more land, and so I use the invade kingdom casus belli on the neighboring I always get this one wrong. On the neighboring Manichaeans. Prophet Mani, religion's quite cool, dualistic, that kind of stuff. Winning this war easily. Not soon after, I've done it. I've met all the requirements to become the greatest of Khans. I take the decision, and I manifest destiny. I am Sturla II, Genghis Khan Karling, and it is time to return to Europe.